Have you ever felt cold so deep that just pulling air into your lungs actually hurts? No heating, no walls really, just whatever shelter the landscape happens to offer. Now, imagine that winter doesn't end in a few months. Imagine it lasts for thousands of years. That wasn't a nightmare. That was the Ice Age. And for the people living through it, families, parents, kids, people exactly like us, the cold wasn't just a season, it was a predator, every single day. And to survive it, they had to make choices that are hard for us to even talk about today. This is the story of how far we were willing to go, not out of cruelty, but because the alternative was disappearing entirely. Let's put this into perspective. About 20,000 years ago, giant sheets of ice, miles thick, covered huge parts of the world. Where there wasn't ice, there was permafrost, ground frozen solid, so deep that nothing could grow. But humans didn't migrate away from it. They lived in it, they hunted in it, they raised children in it, and the math of surviving in that world was brutal. Every single calorie mattered, every scrap of fat, every fading hour of daylight, because extreme cold doesn't just make you uncomfortable. It makes food disappear, it makes moving dangerous, it turns every decision into a trade-off between two terrible options. So, when we talk about the dark things these people did, we aren't talking about villains, we're talking about regular people, forced to do the kind of math nobody should ever have to do. Let's start with something that sounds perfectly normal: clothing. To survive, early humans figured out how to make tailored, layered clothes using tiny bone needles. But nothing, absolutely nothing, was wasted. You hunt an animal, you eat the meat, the fat, that becomes fuel for your only light. The sinew, that becomes thread. The bones, they become your tools. Even your house. In Siberia, archaeologists have found shelters built almost entirely out of mammoth bones, because there were no trees for hundreds of miles. Just think about that for a second. Your family's roof is held up by the skeleton of the animal you ate all winter. It's not sentimental, it's not wasteful, it's absolute, total efficiency. Because if you aren't efficient, you starve. But what happens when efficiency isn't enough? This is where the story gets harder to sit with. At several Ice Age sites in Europe, researchers have found human bones with cut marks on them. Not ceremonial markings, butchery marks, the exact same kind found on animal carcasses, in a place called Goff's Cave in England. Bones from 15,000 years ago show that meat and marrow were extracted. Now, we have to be careful here. Some of this might have been ritual mourning, but a lot of it points to straightforward survival cannibalism, eating the dead, not out of malice, but because the living needed to eat something, and there was simply nothing else left. It's a terrifying thought, but when you really think about it, it shows just how powerful the human will to survive actually is. When every other option is gone, there's another reality of the cold, a quieter one, and in some ways, a harder one. In several traditional Arctic societies, there are documented accounts of something called sinecide. It's when an elderly or weak person stays behind, so the rest of the group can keep moving. This wasn't abandonment out of cruelty. It was out of arithmetic. If a group has to move to find food, and someone can't keep up, carrying them might mean everyone dies in the snow. Sometimes, elders made the choice themselves. They would choose to sit by a dying fire and watch their family walk away. Try to put yourself in those shoes. Try being the one staying behind, or the one who has to accept it. From the comfort of our centrally heated homes, it sounds harsh, but in a world where the cold takes life without hesitation, sometimes the harshest choice is the only one that guarantees someone lives to see tomorrow. Let's step back from death for a moment. Let's talk about the sheer discipline it took to stay alive. Fire wasn't just comfort, it was the only barrier between you and freezing to death in your sleep. And keeping it alive, that was a full-time responsibility. Someone was always watching the fire, always, because if a blizzard blows through and the fire dies, you might not be able to relight it. Flint and tinder don't cooperate when your hands are numb and everything is buried in snow. They protected their fires like a member of the family. They carried embers between camps. They built windbreaks to shield the flame before they even finished their own shelter. Losing the fire wasn't a mistake. It was a death sentence for the entire group, all at once. So, why tell this story? Why sit with something this heavy? Because I think it's incredibly easy, from where we stand today, to look back at our ancestors and think of them as simple, almost primitive. But nothing we just talked about is simple. The brutal math of who gets left behind, the willingness to use every single piece of a fallen animal, the absolute discipline to guard a flame through an entire winter. That takes strategy, it takes grief, and, honestly, it takes love. Choosing to stay behind in the snow so your children can keep moving. That isn't a lack of humanity, it might be the clearest expression of it. The cold didn't just test their bodies, it tested exactly how far they were willing to go to protect the people they cared about. And somehow, enough of them made it through, which is, when you think about it, the only reason any of us are here to tell their story at all.